You are listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast, where we look to educate and entertain the endurance racing community through discussions with racing professionals and elite age groupers.
In today's episode, I speak with ultra runner Darcy Piceu. She's one of the most accomplished ultra runners in the world, running in over 70 ultras, including 3 wins at Hardrock. I hope you enjoy our conversation. Darcy, welcome to the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. So why don't we start off with a little bit about your background? How did you get into running and ultra running?
Well, it began quite a while ago, I guess, teaching Outward Bound. And I was taking kids into the wilderness with gigantic backpacks on our back, traveling short distances with a lot of weight on our backs, and then kind of slowly realized sort of my deep love for being in the mountains and in nature. And then also, when I took the pack off, kind of realizing the love for traveling light on my feet and seeing where it could take me in the mountains, basically. So, kind of started there. And I also lived in Breckenridge. I went to undergrad and graduate school in Colorado. So I've been in Colorado for a long time, and then I was teaching skiing at the time. And then I guess it just kind of started from doing different sports, skiing and running and snowshoeing and biking and all of that. And then did my first trail marathon in Breckenridge back in, I think, 2001, maybe. So started a long time ago.
I remember as a kid, I had an Outward Bound manual that had a Colorado hiking trip, and I always wanted to do it, but my parents never allowed me to. But it's funny you say that, because that sort of was on my radar as a young kid, and then I wanted to go to University of Colorado, but that didn't happen, and I wanted to be a ski instructor. So you did all the things I wanted to do, but never got around to it.
Where do you live now?
I live in New York City, so I grew up out here, but I definitely love skiing and love the outdoors and stuff. So Colorado's always been close to my heart. I just don't get out there enough. So
we have some pretty special mountains out here.
Oh yeah, for sure. So you've done, well over 70 ultra races in your career, including many 100-milers and such. So what would be a few of your favorites?
Well, I guess the most, I think, special one for me is the Hardrock 100. I don't, typically over the years, I haven't had a habit of going back to a race multiple times, and Hardrock is the one race that I just keep going back to. And I think I've said it a million times, but it's just really the mountains, the San Juan Mountains in southern Colorado, that keep kind of bringing me back there. And the community that it draws is it's like family, and the towns out there feel like home. So, that's one that I keep going back to, and I've run it 6 times, and this year will be my 7th time. I'm hoping for 10 finishes there, which is unusual for me. I don't typically do that. And other races, there's so many out there. I also really love the Bighorn. I like the 50 and the 100 at Bighorn, which is in Wyoming. It's kind of a smaller race, and I like that feel, similar to Hardrock. You kind of get to know people as I've done it over the years. So I do like sort of the smaller feel races, Wasatch 100 as well. I've done that a few times, and I really love that 100-miler. And I think, UTMB in France is definitely a special experience, and nothing like we have in the United States. So, and I've done that twice. And that's just it's such a different international experience, but also a beautiful, beautiful area and really gorgeous course. So,
right. Yeah. So going back to Hardrock for a minute, I mean, you've won that 3 times. You obviously said you're going to do your 7th one this year. I mean, what do you think some of the keys to your success there are, other than having done it multiple times? You've been very successful there. I mean, why is that?
I think that, I also, leading up to running it for the first time, I crewed and paced different friends over the years. So I think I crewed and paced a couple different female friends of mine. And so really got a sense of the area and what the mountains could do, basically. And I also have I think going into it, I really have a deep respect for the mountains and the things that can happen in the mountains and the weather that can unleash can be pretty intense there. You know, I've always kind of gone into it sort of, I guess, humble, because anything can happen out there. And it's really all about being comfortable in the mountains and knowing how to take care of yourself and knowing how to keep yourself fueled and eating right and drinking, changing clothes, putting, layers on when you need to, that kind of a thing. So I guess, I think Outward Bound comes into play there, because I learned a lot through leading courses for Outward Bound, being in the mountains and how to take care of yourself. So I think that has been really helpful for me over the years.
If someone were to say, okay, I've done, 50 milers, 50Ks, 100Ks, whatever, but I want to do 100 miler. And obviously Hardrock has prereqs to get in and all that thing. But what other race would you say would be sort of, the one where you would say, okay, this is, if you only are going to do one, this is the one I would recommend?
I think that really depends on the individual's strengths and what they enjoy, really and truly. Because, for me, I love technical mountain trails. I love being in the mountains and going up and down a lot. A course like Vermont, which I've done, is not my style. I don't want to be running on flat terrain for 100 miles.
Right.
So I think it really depends on what you love to do and choosing based on that. And or what your strengths are. Yeah. And I've kind of, over the years, I've tried them all, but, I've realized what feels right to me and what I really love to do. And I think that's, when you're going that far, I think it's important to really love what you're doing out there.
So in 2016, you did the Bigfoot 120-mile race and won it. So talk about that race a little bit. I mean, that is definitely, I've talked about it on this podcast a few times in terms of the Bigfoot 200 and all. In that race, I had some people on who've done it and that type of thing. But it looks like an amazing landscape and a really cool course. I mean, how is that race for you?
Yeah, that's why I chose it. I had seen Candace Burt, the race director, posted photos the year prior, and I really and truly, I just said, wow, that looks really pretty. I want to go run that. So I did. And it's really stunning when the views came out. So last year, we had a lot of rain, and by a lot of rain, I mean like 20 hours of rain. So it was, or even more actually, I think. So like the first night, it didn't stop raining. The first time I think I ever saw this sort of like a small break in the clouds was the next morning. And then luckily I did catch a break when we were around Mount St. Helens. And actually the storm kind of broke for a while. So we got some pretty amazing views in that section, which I was so grateful for, because otherwise, for me, it was a very, very, very wet, and rainy race, but it was beautiful. It's gorgeous. The forests are like, it feels like you're in Neverland, or like an enchanted forest kind of thing. It's really, really amazing. So I really enjoyed it, other than minus the torrential rain.
Yeah. And how would you compare the terrain to some of the like Rocky Mountain races? I mean, how was it? I know there's a lot of climbing out there, but is it similar?
Not quite. I think our terrain is much rockier and steeper. I think this was a lot more runnable. There were some sections, there were some Tallahassee sections that were up higher, more towards the finish line that I remember, that got fairly technical, but I think it's a little more runnable, much more like, it's just a moister climate. So it's not as like dry and rocky as, out here. It's kind of like deserty, rocky, hard rocks, that kind of a thing.
Right. So one more race question, and I promise we'll move on. But you've done so many cool races; it's hard not to kind of grill you on this subject. But a non-running one, actually, I noticed that you did the Leadville Snowshoe Marathon. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So what was that like? I mean, I know almost nothing about snowshoeing other than it's difficult. And then I see Leadville in the title, and I'm like, okay, that's on altitude snowshoeing marathon. I mean, that sounds incredibly tough.
It's hard. I mean, I consider that to be more like an ultra, because you're on snowshoes, and it takes much longer than it would to run an actual marathon because you're on snowshoes. And it varies, obviously, dependent upon the snow. So there's been years where the snow was really deep and we were breaking trail, and it gets really slow moving, slow going. And then if you've got more of a packed trail in front of you, you can move much quicker. And I've done it a couple times, but I've also, they're also really strict on your, the snowshoe size. So, you have to be within regulation size. And I think actually one year I got my number ripped because I was wearing shoes that were like a millimeter, off the proper sizing or something of the snowshoes. So yeah, but that's a fun one. It's more like, it feels a little bit more like adventure racing kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah. And do you find snowshoeing a good cross training for in the winter when obviously snow on the ground? Is that one of the reasons you do it for cross training to the running?
Yeah, I think so. I love snow sports. I mean, I love skiing. I love backcountry skiing. I love snowshoeing. I love cross country skiing. So really, I do have a love for snow sports as well as trail running. And yeah, I definitely was into snowshoe races for, a number of years. I've been drawn away from that and more towards the ski mountaineering now, but I do think it's such an unbelievable aerobic workout.
Right.
You're just, if you do like a 10K on snowshoes, you're anaerobic for an hour,
yeah.
which is a great workout. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you mentioning ski mountaineering, that seems to be really becoming more and more popular, and definitely a lot of ultra runners do it. So it must be obviously a really good workout, but must be a good cross training for the off season, right? When there's snow on the ground and keeping the legs going.
That has seemed to be one of the it seems like that's the best winter cross trainer, because you're literally like running up a mountain on skis, at altitude, but then you just don't have the impact.
Right.
So you can do an 8-hour race on skis and not be hobbling around the next day sore, like you would a 50-mile race or something like that the day before. So it's I think in that sense it's great.
Right. So, I guess we've gone through kind of a Rolodex of amazing accomplishments, and I didn't even get halfway started on, a lot of what you've done in terms of ultra running. And obviously we've talked a little bit about the skiing and stuff, but, it's needless to say that it requires mental toughness to do the things that you've done, the races that you've won and all of that. I mean, how did you develop that over time? And, do you have any like tactics or tips or tricks that you do for mental toughness during a race when you get into those dark moments?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, for me, it was originally I did a lot of solo training, which like I did a lot of running on my own. And I think that initially, I guess, built up that mental toughness, if you will. And as time has gone on, I think more and more I'm drawn towards using meditation to strengthen my mind, basically, and to train my mind in the same way that I'm training my body to kind of deal with the suffering and all those different things that come along with running long distances. Right.
So help me understand that a little bit, because I know almost nothing about meditation, but I tried it a few times and it sort of was tough for me, especially I'm like I've got sensory overload here in New York. And so I probably really do need meditation, but is it really just kind of calming the mind and then being able to kind of control your breathing and your mind when you're getting into those moments where, you have a lot of noise because there's a lot of pain? Is that sort of the essence of it?
Yeah. I mean, there's so many different versions of meditation, and some people use guided meditations, and some people just, like for me, I just sit. It's really just about doing nothing and being silent, finding a comfortable spot, usually in my house. I don't do it outside. And just sitting and being with the thoughts that come up in my mind, and allowing them to come, and then also kind of watching them go. And I think in terms of how it helps with running, it's one of those things where, like I said, when you're our minds play tricks on us and can convince us. A lot of times it's mind over matter, right? It's, our minds start to come into play around and things start to get hard, and the mind starts to come in and say, I want to quit, or why am I doing this? Those types of things. And I think meditation comes in at that point to where you can kind of start to, I hate to say control those thoughts, but kind of ask yourself the question, like, how is this serving me to be thinking this way, kind of a thing. And then I guess just allowing them to be there and not trying to change or manipulate the thoughts, but that it's okay that they're there and you can keep going.
Right. I mean, to give you an example,
I don't know if that makes sense.
I think it does. I mean, to give you an example, so I do triathlons as well as running, and I do in the winter a lot of training on the bike, but on an indoor trainer. And so typically you set up like a screen and watch a movie or something, but you get to these intervals that are really, really tough, and my mind is so noisy that I can't even look or concentrate on anything other than the pain. So I think that being able to control that and trying to not let it overwhelm you, which is sort of what I struggle with, I think would be really powerful. And then of course you can apply it to racing as well. So it does make sense.
Right. So being able to just sit with whatever comes up is huge.
Yeah.
No matter how the monkey mind that comes in, just being able to sit with it is really helpful.
Right.
I think in those moments.
Right. And so realizing that there's a ton of different ways someone can go about doing, meditation, yoga, different breathing exercises, things like that. I mean, what would your recommendation be for someone like me who knows almost nothing about it and obviously could use it? I mean, where would a good starting point be? Is there a book or a place to reference or just talk to people? I mean, how would you recommend to someone who's sort of lost?
Yeah. Well, the way I started was, and I'm sure there's a million of them in New York and elsewhere, but in Boulder, there's a place called the Shambhala Center, and I started there. And actually, the head of the lineage with the Shambhala Center is also happens to be a runner, and he wrote a book called Running with the Mind of Meditation. And so in the Shambhala Center, they have beginner open sessions almost on a daily basis there. So you can go and just sit and have someone kind of help guide you through it. I think it's helpful to the first couple or several times that you might want to meditate. It's helpful to have someone kind of sit with you and guide you, just to kind of have an idea of what your posture is supposed to feel like and how you should be seated and all those kinds of things. So I think it's helpful if you can find some type of meditation instructor.
Yeah.
And there's a billion books out there for sure. I'm sure there's a million books on meditation. I'm not necessarily drawn to one, but and then now there's apps with guided meditations. There's like mindful meditation apps now that are out that can like pop up reminders on your phone to remind you to sit once a day. Right. So there's so many different options out there now. But I think I would probably start with some type of instructor for the first bit, I think. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. So, if we say that in endurance sports, I don't know what the number is, but like 80% is mental, I don't know, 5% is genetic and 10% is training. I made these numbers up, so training is definitely a part of it in terms of physical fitness and stuff like that. And so you obviously have been in the sport a long time and had a lot of success and longevity. So I'm just curious, like, what does your training look like and how has it evolved from like when you first started to the kind of understanding now what it, really takes and sort of not overtraining and the kind of the things that beginners have issues with?
Well, I think that one of the parts that I've actually done maybe a little better with is that I tend to not overtrain. I think what I've seen a lot with people entering into the sport is trying to log just miles and miles and miles, which I think tends to just break the body down. I would say focus more on, getting quality workouts in versus quantity. maybe initially get a coach or, read a book on how to train for your first ultra, something like that. And for me, it's the way it's evolved, I think is more, I think now, my tendency is to focus a lot on recovery. And I think that's another piece that gets lost in training is not focusing enough on getting sleep, getting massage, regular body work done, things like that. And then also doing some form of cross training, whether it's like balancing it out with something like yoga, or now I've started to do more eccentric exercises that kind of strengthen the muscles that don't get used in running, basically, to kind of even things out. And for me, just getting older now, I really have to focus on that piece. And I think sometimes that gets lost in the training. And when people start out, they, just getting excited about just running. Whereas for me now, I'm just, I have to take care of myself a lot better now.
Right. Yeah, that's a really, really important point. And it's something I'm still getting kind of up to speed on is what works for me. And so, so you mentioned a few, obviously sleep's important and cross-training, that kind of stuff. I mean, and yoga and those types of things. Is there anything else you do from a recovery perspective? I mean, I'll give you an example. I take Epsom salt baths after I do long runs. And for some reason, I feel like brand new afterwards. So, so I swear by those. But, everyone's got a little trick or up their sleeve that works for them. I mean, what else do you kind of have in your portfolio of things?
Yeah, I always use a recovery drink of anything more than 2 hours. Generally, any run that I have that's more than 2 hours, I drink a recovery drink. When I can, I try to get on a foam roller pretty regularly, so I'm rolling out my legs, and I mean like spending 20 minutes, really kind of getting into the deep tissues of the muscles and whatnot.
I'm envious of that because, I have a foam roller and after about 5 minutes of pain, I stop. I've never gotten to 20 minutes, but I know it's really good for you, but it's tough.
Yeah, that's where the breathing comes in. Right?
Right, exactly. So I've got to get the meditation and the foam rolling, get all together, and I'll be very good.
Right. Yeah, I do find foam rolling helps me a lot in recovery, and I don't do it enough. But and again, I mean, for me, truthfully, I realize more and more sleep is not. I mean, if I get under 8 hours, it impacts my training. So like 8 to 10 hours is ideal, and that doesn't happen all the time.
Right.
But yeah, I can't emphasize that piece enough.
Yeah, I agree with that. Sometimes I go to bed wrecked physically because it's a hard workout day or whatever, or hard at work or, something. And then I wake up, solid 8 hours, and I wake up and I feel really fresh and good. But if it's 6-7 hours, I I can still feel the day before, and it really makes it tough.
Yeah, exactly.
And my wife always complains that I sleep too much, but I'm like, I need it. Now I have your endorsement, so I'm going to take this and make sure she listens.
Yeah, I know it's crazy. I mean, I definitely don't always get it, but it helps a lot.
Right. So we're almost out of time here. So I guess one final question, from a race perspective, what else do you have on tap in 2017? Obviously, you mentioned Hardrock, and a kind of a secondary question would be, are there any races that are on your bucket list that are still kind of either doing it this year or not doing it this year, but just sort of out there that's saying, I eventually want to do that one and I haven't?
Yeah. So Hardrock, I'm going to Moab this weekend. It'll be a sprint. It'll probably be really painful for me, but there's a Massa run. I think it's a 25K. So that will be painful.
Oh yeah.
And then I have just a lot of 3 or 4 projects that I want to do this summer, more kind of along the lines of FKT adventure runs and races that, I've always wanted to run the Angeles Crest, and I always miss the sign up when it happens the day after the race, the race finishes, and I always forget to sign up. So that is one that I would really like to do. And I'm sure there's more, international races. I'd like to go to Andorra
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
And run that. And I would like to say I'd like to do the Tour de Géants at some point, but I don't know if I'm tough enough for that one.
Yeah, you said you like
really burly.
Yeah, you said you like climbing, so that's right, right up your alley if you want ups and downs.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. I don't know. That one seems pretty daunting to me, even.
Yeah, we had Nick Holland on the podcast, I don't know, a month or two ago. He was talking about it. I think he's done it twice or whatever, but he raves about it. That's one of his favorites.
I mean, it looks fantastic. It looks amazing and beautiful. But some of the stories I hear, just make me cringe. So I don't know. I don't know if I want to have that kind of exposure for that long.
Right. Well, Darcy, thank you so much for your time today and sharing some of your stories and tips, and definitely the meditation stuff really has kind of intrigued me. So I'm going to do a little bit more research there for myself. And again, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Intelligent Racer Podcast. For more information on this and other episodes, please visit www.intelligentracer.com. Also, be sure to check us out on social media, and please review us on your podcast directory. Join us next time for another edition of the Intelligent Racer.